Okay, so now we're up to project scope management, which is, although it's called lesson 6, it's lesson 5 in the questions, and it is chapter 5 in the PMBOK.
Okay.
And so scope management, what we're going to do is define what it is, differentiate between project and product scope, identify the key terms used in project scope management, explain the work breakdown structure, which is how we decompose the work, and then describe the project scope management process.
Okay.
So definitionally, I'm going to read the purple box. Project scope management includes the processes required to ensure that a project includes all the work required, and only the work required, to complete the project successfully. So basically, managing the project is concerned with controlling what should be in the scope of the project. And if you could see my hands, you can see my hands because I can put it on the webcam. Okay, so I would explain this as, okay, wait, the camera's jumping around on my, how come it's, oh, it's black because I don't have the window open. Okay, so.
Oh, there you are.
There I am. And so it's like a little pond. And so if you imagine my fingers as being the shores, the pond is always trying to challenge those shores. It's either trying to overlap or it's trying to shrink back. So think of that as that's the dynamic tension, is the scope is like a little body of water where it's always nipping at the shore, but it never stays constant. It never just stays still and does nothing.
Okay.
So that's what I think about scope. And so the project scope,
it means managing what's defined in the scope.
Right, and so, but that definition is always it's always threatening to either overrun the banks or to shrink back. So that's the project manager's job, is to keep the pond, as it were, the body of water, within the right banks. So the key activities in project scope management are to ensure constant monitoring, to avoid scope creep, and remember we talked about the ever-present danger of scope creep, and to prevent gold plating. And now this is one place in which, basically PMI wants you to be such a good employee, to look out for everyone but yourself first, to be completely honest and totally ethical, even in countries where that may not be the communication of the realm. But they do want you to prevent gold plating. So in other words, you don't want to do more work than is required for the project. So that is a key thing to know and understand, because that seems somehow, in my head at least, different from everything else that we've talked about so far.
Now, avoid doing more. Can you go back to that one?
Sure.
Doing more work.
So in other words, like gold plating, say you were doing work on a laptop, and for some reason you had a quantity of extra fans that you could put another fan in every single laptop, and that would keep it cooler on everybody's lap. And one of the key items that the sponsor wanted was a rather cool laptop. And so you're thinking, and it wouldn't take, you have time, there's slack in the schedule, what have you, so you decide, I'm going to throw another fan in the laptop. Well, the problem with that kind of gold plating is, now you've added to the weight, so you've got an advertised weight for the laptop, and even if the fan doesn't weigh much, it weighs something, so you may have pushed the advertised weight into a different category, but B, it consumes power, and so now you've potentially reduced the battery life on a full charge. So anytime you do something extra added more, it most likely has ramifications. Okay. So, and if you send a service person out, say, for some reason the fan or fans died, if a regular service kit just had a single fan or was planned to have a single fan, now all of a sudden you've required the service kit to have 2 fans because they might both die. So, therefore, you don't want to do more, even if it seems free, easy, in conformance with requirements makes the stakeholders happy. You only want to do what is required and what is specified.
Okay.
So quality, remember, going back to quality being the conformance to requirements.
Okay.
Because you might say, oh, that's a higher quality laptop if it's cooler, but it doesn't conform to the requirements, so it's not higher quality. Okay, so now we're going to go, again, product versus project scope. And project scope management deals with managing both the product as well as the project. So let's differentiate between the two. The product scope are the features and functions that characterize the product, service, or result. So, for instance, savings accounts and mutual funds are called products. Whereas the project scope is the work performed to deliver a product, service, or result with specified features or functions. So, project scope, if you were thinking about a Venn diagram, is the all-encompassing circle, and then project scope is inside the circle, and product scope is the all-encompassing outer circle. So, in other words, to deliver a product, requirements and design documents have to be produced. So does that make sense? Product versus project?
Technically the project scope is, you know, it's the processes along, you know, the way to deliver that project.
Right. It's all the behind the music stuff, you know, all the documentation, and, you know, in terms of the product, it's just the bigger part. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about the work breakdown structure. And this is a deliverable-oriented functional decomposition of the project scope of work into hierarchically grouped work elements. So anything that's not in the work breakdown structure, in other words, at this bottom row of the breakdown, is not something that should be done. So if you, say, assign accounting codes, time charge codes, whatever, you know, even if you assign them at this level, it should be clear what goes on at this level, and therefore nothing should be done because it's gold plating or something. It's change. It's an unspecified change. So nothing that's unspecified should be done. So you prepare the work breakdown structure with the team buy-in, and during the level of decomposition, you should decompose that level entirely, unless you're going to progressively elaborate something. And again, we've got to have a pretty good idea of what's in that progressive elaboration so that we don't have overlap and conflict with other things as we decompose them. And again, decomposition should be done until the lowest work unit cannot logically be subdivided further or estimated with reasonable accuracy. So you want to make sure that you decompose far enough but not too far. You know, in other words, if you decompose down to, like, say, the 15-minute level, people are going to spend a lot more time account coding and things like that than they are actually doing the work.
It should include all the work in the project before decomposing.
So you want to be very reasonable in how you break down your work breakdown structure. But if I asked you to break down, say, your week, you could probably break down the near-term week, but say 5 weeks from now, it's going to be harder to break that down. So say this week you might be able to break down into hours.
Like you're listing the phase and then you're listing what's going into it.
Well, basically you're decomposing, so from the top level, and depending on what your top level organization is, and it could be very functional in terms of what you're doing, or it could be temporal. You know, so say functional, it could be slab, framing, siding, finishing, roofing, whatever, or it could be requirements, design, implementation, testing, what, you know, depends. So the initial work breakdown structure is based on what your organization decides, the way your organization decides to break it down. But down on this bottom level, these should all be broken down uniquely so that one and only one work package element addresses that piece of work to be done. You know, you wouldn't want this one and that one to be virtually the same thing or have overlapping work. You want each of these to be unique and different. So the work breakdown structure defines the total project work. If a deliverable is not in the work breakdown structure, it's not in the project. Each descending level represents increasingly detailed definition of the project work to be performed. And the WBS is the foundation for project task definition, resource and performance planning, cost estimating, budget control, etc. So basically you want to set your control accounts at about the work package level, at the bottom level of work breakdown structure, and then you do your time charging and your progress measurement accordingly. So, and then to continue, we've got work packages which are decomposed to their lowest level when decomposing them offers no further value, or when the work packages can realistically be estimated and they have a meaningful conclusion. So usually that unit is less than a month, let's say, but probably more than a day or even a week. So, it's basically down to, what one or two people can do in a reasonably short period of time. Like I was saying, you can probably say what you're going to do for the next week or two, or maybe even a month. But if I asked you what you were going to do in November, you're going to be a little bit harder pressed to really, scope that out. So for a completely decomposed project, you should have a single purpose in the work package, which is what we call the thing at the bottom of the tree. Again, be decomposed down to the lowest level, be estimable with a high degree of accuracy. So like I said, you should be able to highly estimate, something that takes 2 weeks, because when you're doing that, you can tell whether you're a week or 2 weeks into it. And then it should be clearly understood in terms of what the work product is. So some of the key terms for work breakdown structures are, of course, work breakdown structure, which is a hierarchy which is progressively decomposed. The work breakdown structure dictionary, which is the document that explains all of the detailed deliverable activity. So the schedule information, the budget information, who's assigned and that kind of thing. What resources, where in the schedule it fits, predecessors, successors, and so on. And then the project scope statement, especially the major assumptions and constraints, and projects deliverables in detail, and then the control account. So say if your control accounts are at the work package level, a management control point is where the scope, budget, and actual cost and schedule are integrated and compared to earned value for performance measurement. So we'll talk a little bit more about earned value in the... Huh?
Does this contain any variances? It says budget, actual cost. So you're looking possibly at variances as the control account to measure variances, or no?
Right. And so when we get to the next, well, maybe not the next one. Well, we could talk schedule variances in the next section, and then the section after that we'll talk cost variances. But yeah, so all of that information is encapsulated in this control account. And so remember, that's the data that then we work on that, and then we, so we've got the control account data, and then we transform that into information by, say, calculating variances, and then we create reports. Okay. So, on the work performance based on the control account. But that way you're comparing apples to apples, because if we go back to our little hierarchy, where's our little hierarchy? So you don't want to have control accounts at this level and then, say for cost, and then have schedule down here, because then you're not comparing apples to apples. So you want the control account to be at the same level of the work breakdown structure decomposition. So here's an example of the WBS, and this is for a banking system. So you've got requirements, design, so this is organized in a kind of a waterfall life cycle. And again, what you put at the top level is purely subject to your company's organizational structure and OPAs. But these need to cover the waterfront. So everything that's going to be done on this project has to fall into one of these 5 boxes. And then each of these boxes is decomposed, designing into models and prototypes, coding into 2 different work packages, testing into two different work packages and then go live into installing a warranty sheet, say, for instance. And so, you know, just as these 5 need to cover the waterfront, then this one and these 8 need to cover the waterfront in terms of the WBS breakdown.